Good evening, I suppose, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. Um, just watched Brian Barczyk's goodbye video. It was hard to watch for a lot of people, I'm sure. Also, but so I just wanted to really quick say thank you to him and his family because, like so many, literally millions of other people out there, his work in the hobby made an impact, made this reptile world more accessible to me. So, as my thank you, I wanted to kind of explain his influence for me. What happened at the beginning, because I've never met him, never been to his reptarium. I'm not a daily watcher of his vlog. And so maybe his impact on me was different than on a lot of you guys, but it was a real impact. And so let me just tell you guys, and maybe I've brought this up on the vlog before, but about 10 years ago, I'm at college. Honestly, more than 10 years ago now, but didn't know what to major in. I kind of vaguely knew, and I always had known, that I loved animals and somehow working with animals might be awesome. But all that was in my brain was the only possible ways to work with animals are in a zoo capacity somehow, or like a veterinarian. And I know I didn't want to be a veterinarian, and I wasn't sure about how to like break into the world of zookeeping. But it was just kind of always in the back of my mind. And I tried out a couple majors, explored a little. Nothing was sticking. And then I found what I ended up majoring in, getting my degree in, which was wildlife conservation. My university had a really good program in wildlife and wildlands conservation. So maybe 1 or 2 semesters in, sitting in some class, ornithology I think it was, and I overhear some master's students talking about careers that people from this major often fed into. And by this point, I knew about a lot of agencies, things like Fish and Game, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Forestry Service, Bureau of Land Management, etc. A lot of government jobs. These are all entities, by the way, that a lot of people in the reptile world just absolutely detest. But I strongly considered working for one of those back in the day. I knew about that stuff. So they talked about that, and at this point I'm listening avidly because I'm very curious. They talked about zoos. They talked about veterinarians, which I already knew about. A few other things, and then one of them mentioned he said something like, it's possible to make good money being an exotic animal breeder. I've had a couple of friends from our major do that. And my ears perked up, and I'm like, whoa, what is that? It had just never dawned on me. It had never occurred to me that that's even a thing. And I don't know where my brain was at. I'd been to pet stores, and I knew they don't just pop up out of nowhere. Someone had to either go catch those animals or breed those animals. They don't just begin existence in a pet store, right? And that it caught my ear, right? Again, this is about 10 years ago. And I whip out my phone and I'm looking up stuff. And who do you think is the very first person that comes up on any of my searches about how to become a reptile breeder, what kind of exotic animals can be bred for profit, things like that. Is it possible to do this as a career, or is it really just a hobby? Because I was just super intrigued. And of course, it's Brian Barczyk, right? Who comes up. Google's recommending his videos. He's all over the place. Big, huge smile. looks just like the happiest guy, and I watched a couple of his videos, and back then it wasn't his daily vlog, it was just snake bites, right? Which I don't know if he even does anymore. A little more silly, a little more YouTube-y, right? High energy, skits and things like that sometimes. His crew was hilarious. And I see his facility because, he didn't have a zoo back then. He was primarily BHB, his breeding business. And it was huge. And I'm looking at just thousands of snakes and geckos, and I was blown away. Like, well, obviously somebody managed to make a career out of doing this, right? I was intrigued. And so that was my very first moment in my life where I realized and then believed I could do this if I want to. And I did want to. So I race home, talk to my brand new wife. I'm like, should we just ditch all our plans and be reptile breeders? And with zero hesitation, she's like, yeah. And I show her Brian Barczyk. I'm like, look at this guy. He's got all these snakes and he breeds them and he sells them. And obviously it's commercially viable and whatever. And she was intrigued. And so, yeah, that's kind of my origin story and how Brian Barczyk was right from the beginning so important, because it's not just that we happened to come across him first. He paved the way for people to find the hobby, right? He's an incredibly knowledgeable reptile, I guess you could call him a hobbyist, but I mean, really expert level knowledge. But that doesn't mean he's the most knowledgeable of anyone ever who's had reptiles. He's an extremely accomplished reptile handler. But does that mean he's the greatest handler ever? No. He is a superb businessman. Does that mean he's the best businessman ever? No. However, I think it is, unless you are a crazy person or just a hater, it is undeniable that he is the best at bringing people into the hobby as a newcomer that there has ever been. And when I say the hobby, I really just mean someone who loves reptiles, right? There's millions of people out there who either hated reptiles or never had thought about reptiles in their life, who are now lovers of reptiles. They are hobbyists. They are, some of them have businesses now. Some of them have their own pet reptiles. And I think about the millions of snakes slithering through the grass that a normal person screams and runs away, or they scream and they grab a shovel and they chop it up. And how many of those people he has convinced not to do that. So from a conservation perspective, where, yes, conservation needs money, conservation needs good science, it needs research, it needs these things that typically us hobbyists aren't the best at providing. But do you know what it needs from the very beginning? That none of that other stuff will matter if it doesn't get. It needs people to like the things that are being conserved. If there aren't a critical mass of humans who love the species, they will not be conserved. It just will not happen. There's a reason that bald eagles and grizzly bears and tigers and pandas get tens of millions of dollars poured into them if they're threatened with a problem, an environmental problem, a man-made hazard, roads that need underpasses for wildlife, DDT that needs banning because it's killing birds of prey, thinning out their eggs, whatever the case may be. These iconic animals that everybody admires, it's pretty easy to protect them, especially in the United States where the government's so willing to spend money and real resources on it. And we have laws with real teeth, like the Endangered Species Act. But what about a snake? You need somebody to promote and educate people on why they should love this animal, because it's not this giant impressive bear, it's not this iconic American eagle, it's a snake. A lot of people are just, their default is to hate it and fear it. And Brian Barczyk spent decades of his life teaching people, not condemning them, not saying you're some sort of monster if you hate snakes, just showing them over and over and over again, one-on-one, in large groups, to millions of people on the internet. He did not care. He was constantly showing people that these are amazing. And I think many types of colubrids and then ball pythons, their popularity would not be half of what it is today without him specifically just relentlessly, passionately, and excitedly and happily promoting how amazing these animals are. So I just add my one voice to the hundreds of thousands that have already spoken up, and I just want to thank Brian Barczyk. Again, never had the pleasure to meet him, but I know that his work impacted my life in a lot of good ways. And you know, what's happened with his health is just a pure tragedy. Obviously the most for him and his family, but the whole reptile world will mourn him, but also should celebrate him. I firmly believe that. And so, yeah, that is all, guys. If anyone has anything, any memories, or wants to share their impact that Brian had on their life, I invite you to do that in the comments. And I am grateful for all you guys who watch this vlog. I know that compared to someone like Brian, I'm just a teeny tiny breeder and a tinier YouTuber, but it's important to me. I love doing it, and a large piece of credit is owed to Brian Barczyk and his family, that I am even doing this today. So that is all. Thank you guys so much for watching. We are all praying and thinking about Brian right now. Until next time, we are the Reptile Barn.